Hello and welcome to Land of 10 Live. I'm Sam Radin and I'm so pleased to be joined by former Michigan Wolverine standout Chris Howard. It's our first edition of Land of 10 Live and we jump right in the middle of the season. And Chris, I'm really happy to be doing this with you.
All right, man, me too. But I noticed that you got the nice shirt and I don't. I'm kind of like regular guy.
Well, see, the thing is that you're Chris Howard, former Michigan Wolverine, Rose Bowl champion, 1997 national champion. You played in the NFL, you were drafted in the NFL, you've got a Wikipedia page, and I got to sit here and look official or something like that. So the least they could do, I figured.
I get it. I get it.
Good evening and welcome to the inaugural edition of Land of 10 Live. I'm Sam Radin, very happy to be joined by former Michigan Wolverine great Chris Howard. Chris, the first edition of Land of 10 Live, and we jump right into the middle of the Big Ten season.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here and to talk about some Michigan football as well as the Big Ten. A lot of stuff happened this week, and I'm ready to get into it.
Well, you're a former Michigan Wolverine player. I'm a longtime Michigan Wolverine fan. We are coming off a good week for Michigan, but Michigan not exactly the top storyline in the Big Ten this week. It's Michigan's rivals who are dominating the headlines.
Yeah, Ohio State, I mean, you know, last week they looked like world beaters. This week, not so much. JT Barrett just had an awful game after coming off an unbelievable performance. Ohio State, they're just in a position right now we just really haven't seen them at this point in the season.
For sure. And when you talk about the Ohio State performance and you look at JT Barrett and the kind of performance he put up 2 weeks ago, it's almost like the Big Ten and their Heisman Trophy candidacy has kind of gone the way of their playoff candidacy. All of a sudden, the rug is yanked out from underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what needs to happen right now with Ohio State? Listen, they still control their own destiny. They're still in the hunt for the Big Ten East. They just need to rally behind each other, go out and play for each other, put this game behind them, and just focus on Michigan State.
Then obviously that wacky game you had going on with the crazy rain delay between Michigan State and Penn State. And then finally they get back on the field. At that time, Penn State already was aware of the outcome in that Ohio State game. So here's Penn State with an opportunity to kind of, as you said it, control their own destiny or their own fate, whatever you have it. And then they come out and there's that pesky Michigan State team under Mark D'Antonio all of a sudden knocking off another top team that seemed like they kind of had everything going for them.
Listen, this is what Michigan State does. They love chaos. They feed off of chaos. And the one thing that you cannot do is count out a Mark D'Antonio-led team. This is what they thrive off. They thrive off disrespect. And they went out, they played their game, played to their strength. And I tell you what, Brian Lewerke has been on fire the last couple weeks.
Yeah, he's picked up his game for sure. And another team that's kind of picked up its game, especially over the past couple weeks, is the Wisconsin Badgers. They've got some decent quarterback play out of Hornibrook, and they're looking at that typical Wisconsin running game that always seems like it finds a way toward the top of that Big Ten West standings, and that's exactly what's happened again this season.
Yeah, Wisconsin is always going to be Wisconsin. They're going to line up and smash you in the mouth for 60 minutes. Jonathan Taylor's an absolute beast, but Wisconsin might be the most balanced team in the Big Ten right now.
Of course, the big knock on Wisconsin, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this, and as we continue to talk about the playoff picture, Wisconsin's non-conference schedule, and frankly, their conference schedule as well. I mean, what's the win that Wisconsin can hang its hat on so far this season?
Well, the Big Ten West, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. It's really Wisconsin's conference to lose. Wisconsin is just, you know, really has the better talent in that conference. They have the better coaches in that division. There's really no one that can really rival Wisconsin in the West.
Well, and you look at it right there, you're looking at the other teams in that division. We'll spend some time on it later on in our first ever edition of Land of 10 Live, talking about the balance or maybe lack thereof there between the East and the Western divisions in the Big Ten. But you're right, there's no competition whatsoever for Wisconsin, especially with the way Iowa started off the year. Seems like they're good for a couple of marquee wins, like the one they had this week against Ohio State, and last year against Michigan comes to mind, and past games against Penn State for that matter. But the consistency to put together an entire season, Wisconsin seems like they've frankly got some kind of a dominance built up in the Big Ten West.
Well, they've got a formula, and they never veer away from that, and that is the power run game. They will run the ball down your throat, and that's going to open up some passing lanes. They're going to open up some play action, and that's why they're one of the most balanced teams in the Big Ten, period.
You look at Wisconsin, and we see the pictures there. They've been able to do something that not a lot of teams in the Big Ten have been able to do, which is to maintain consistency as their coaching staff has changed, and they've kept that kind of formula, that program identity going, which, look at Nebraska, and we'll talk about them later on this half hour. Not every team is able to do that.
Well, you got to give Paul Chryst and his staff a lot of credit for what they've been able to do in such a short period of time. But again, they recruit well. They understand who they are. They know what their offensive philosophy is. And again, they're just very consistent and very well coached. And that's one of the reasons why Wisconsin has always been one of the top tier teams in the Big Ten.
I feel like I didn't give you the due that you were earned a few minutes ago. We were looking at your highlight package there from the 97 National Championship season, but lest anyone forget, this is 1997 National Champion Chris Howard. Sam Radin with the fancy t-shirt to sit next to you here on our very first edition of Land of 10 Live. Look at this very athletic looking fellow right there in the maize and blue, some classic uniforms. That UCLA game, here, let me do it for you. I think you scored 4 touchdowns in that game, is that right?
Yeah, I did. It was a great game. It was my coming out game because prior to then I was sitting on the bench. I was actually in the doghouse. But yeah, that UCLA game, it was awesome. It was my coming out game. But I had to give credit to the offensive line. I think you could have ran through the holes when we played against UCLA.
I don't know if you've ever seen me run. I don't think anyone wants to see that. They'd rather see you toting the rock. Now, I think Ohio State had some pretty good success toting the rock this season and past seasons, but all of a sudden, they put up a total goose egg, at least when it comes to the statistics that count in that game against Iowa this weekend. I don't know what got into JT Barrett. That's not the type of performance that anyone was expecting out of him, especially coming off what was probably the game of his career in the week before against Penn State. And then all of a sudden, 4 interceptions. And I got to tell you, one of those interceptions was absolutely highlight reel caliber. But that aside, he had a terrible game. You can't mince words about it. He was one of the instrumental reasons why Ohio State lost and got blown out.
Yeah, I really think you have to look at, when you play such an emotional and physically challenging game like they did the previous week, I really think they were spent. And then, of course, when you're playing a team like Iowa, it's really hard to get up for those types of games. You're really relying on your talent. And if you're really not engaged, if you're not really there, if you're kind of going through the motions, like I know, playing in Kinnick Stadium, that's where top-ranked teams go to die. Kinnick Stadium at night is like the Bermuda Triangle of college football. Top-ranked teams go in and their rankings never come out.
Why is that, though? You don't look around the Big Ten and think that Iowa's got this intimidating home crowd and they're always capable of an early season loss to Northwestern or something like that. Why is Iowa this place where they can put together that Kinnick Stadium magic like we're talking about?
I don't know if it's so much what Iowa does. It's just more about teams not going in and playing effective on the road. Ohio State, they did not execute the game plan. JT Barrett never got in rhythm after he threw that pick 6. After that, it was all downhill. Now, the game was close at one point. I believe it was 17-17 at one point, and then Iowa just took it to another level, kicked it in another gear, and really just put the beat down on Ohio State.
Well, and you talk about that and what Iowa was able to accomplish offensively. I think the big story that people talk about from the game is J.T. Barrett and the mistakes. But let's not forget, this is the most points that an Urban Meyer team has ever given up. Now, we're talking about the Bowling Green days, the Utah days, however far you want to take it back. This was an embarrassing performance for the Ohio State defense. And as a Michigan fan, I don't mind when you keep showing 55, 55, 55, 55, 24 flop. I like seeing words like that, but you're not accustomed to seeing words like that in the same sentence with Ohio State.
Listen, I will never apologize for being happy when Ohio State loses, okay? But at the same time, if you go back and you look at that game, the Bosa got ejected for a hit. And again, J.T. Barrett was not himself. He didn't make any plays. He wasn't consistent in anything he did. And again, Iowa, you got to give credit to Iowa. They played a great game. The quarterback, Stanley, I think he threw for 4 touchdowns. He had composure. He was poised. He looked like a leader. He looked like J.T. Barrett should have looked.
If you want to do it this way, and I do, to be unfair to Ohio State, this is the second time in a calendar year that they've been annihilated in a game that people never would have suspected. You look at that Clemson game from the playoff last year, no one sees this coming. Is there something wrong with the formula at Ohio State? How can Urban Meyer be allowing his teams to have numbers like this run up against him? Is there something wrong with Ohio State and what they're doing?
I don't think there's anything wrong with what Ohio State is doing. I mean, again, they just came off an unbelievable performance against a really good Penn State team, a come-from-behind victory. I don't think anything is wrong. At the end of the day, coaches coach, but your players have to go out and make plays. They have to go out and execute. You're never going to win a game when you're throwing 4 interceptions, especially throwing in the red zone and you're throwing pick sixes. You're just not going to win games. As a matter of fact, you can ask Michigan if you can win games by turning the ball over 4 or 5 times.
Or having bad efficiency in the red zone. We know about that, and missed kicks, and all kinds of other things we've learned this season and in some of the frustrating games in years past. I want to stick for a second about coaching, though, and Urban Meyer, and make a comparison, which we'll talk later about with respect to James Franklin and Penn State. Yes, coaches coach and players play, but by the same token, it's the coach's responsibility to not let a team have a letdown. You talk about the big game against Penn State the week before, but that's not fair. I mean, this is college football. You're not supposed to lose a game, and when you're Ohio State and you have the talent they put out on the field week in and week out, you're not supposed to let something like that happen. What is it about these past couple seasons with Ohio State? The defense is not playing the way that Ohio State's defense has been accustomed to play.
Yeah, I think it's just it comes down to a lack of focus. Again, an emotional game the previous week against Penn State. They could have been looking ahead to their next opponent. They could have been reading their press clippings. They could have been doing all sorts of things and probably looking past Iowa. And unfortunately, it really came back to bite them in the rear.
Well, I would put that, if that's what happened, that they're looking past Iowa, sandwich game, whatever you want to call it, with Michigan State on the other end now, I put that squarely on Urban Meyer. You can't have your team lose focus like that. And again, I think that's exactly what James Franklin acknowledged happened at Penn State, and we'll talk about it. But I guess the larger question is, how does this change the overall perception of Ohio State? Is this a team that maybe right now is no longer in that highest stratification, the upper elite of college football that you expect can run the table every single year and be in the playoff? Do we now feel differently because of the past 12 months?
Listen, I would love to say I feel differently about Ohio State and Urban Meyer, but at the end of the day, they're still Ohio State. They still have the best talent. They still have one of the best coaches in all of college football. This is just a game. This could have been just an anomaly, just something that they were not expecting, something they weren't prepared for. But does it change the overall perception of Ohio State? Me personally, I don't think so, because I think they can go in any game and beat any team. But I mean, again, if you put Iowa up against Ohio State, 9 times out of 10, I think Ohio State wins that game. Unfortunately, the bull gets you sometime.
Every once in a while you get the horns, right? You talk about change of perception. How about the last 14 days? We don't have to go back 12 months for this, for what's happened in Happy Valley. Penn State, top of the college football world. Look at this. College Game Day is there. Saquon Barkley, he's the head and shoulders front runner for the Heisman Trophy. And then, boom.
Yeah.
The past 2 weeks, everything flips upside down for Penn State. This team looks like they've unraveled right in front of our eyes, and you start right with Saquon Barkley. He has not put up anywhere near the numbers in the past 2 games that he did in the early part of the season.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you have to give Michigan State a lot of credit. Again, something that hurts my heart to say, but you have to give Michigan State a lot of credit. Their front 7 did an outstanding job of containing Barkley. They played in Penn State's backfield all game long. And again, Michigan State is one of those teams, they thrive in chaos. Penn State had a lot of momentum before the 3-hour rain delay. They had a lot of momentum coming back out. Michigan State had them right where they want them. There was enough time that they can gather themselves and really start to put together an offensive onslaught. Brian Lewerke, again, 2 back-to-back 400-yard games. Prior to that, he was very pedestrian. But these last 2 weeks, Brian Lewerke has looked just as good as Connor Cook did a couple years ago.
Well, that's high praise right there, because Connor Cook had that offense really humming. That's probably the highest point ever in Michigan State football history. Let's stick on Saquon Barkley for 1 second and the missed opportunity that he had individually and Penn State had as a team, and this distraction and focus issue as well. I think we've all seen those pictures in the locker room during the rain delay of him catching candy in his mouth or whatever was going on with that. Is something wrong with that? You've been in those locker rooms. Is there something wrong with what the players are doing during that rain delay, or is that just the kind of chaos you're talking about that Michigan State happens to thrive in?
Well, you know, I would have loved to have seen what was happening in Michigan State's locker room at the same time. I'm sure it was a different atmosphere in their locker room. But listen, you want to kind of stay loose. You want to relax. You don't want to be so uptight, but you can't lose focus. And I think if you ask James Franklin, even if you go back and look at his press conference, I think he even alludes to the fact that he might think that his team has been distracted. I think he believes that they're kind of listening to all the pats on the backs. They're looking at social media. They're believing the hype. And unfortunately, you can believe the hype, but you have to go out and perform, and they didn't perform.
Yeah, I think there's no other way to cut it in that frantic picture of Franklin running down the field to get his player back in the line to shake hands. It was too big for him, that moment. And on the other side of the coin, to give Michigan State a little credit, which I don't like doing either, there's never a moment that seems like it's too big for Mark D'Antonio. His players are always under control. Michigan State always plays its game. Like you said, they thrive on chaos. If I understand what you mean, that's to say that when everything else could be in chaos, Mark D'Antonio doesn't let his team get affected. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Mark D'Antonio keeps his guys focused no matter what happens, no matter what the elements are. They're always focused. They're always engaged. His team is a direct reflection of his personality, intense and always engaged.
When you talk about Lewerke, the quarterback, and the progress that he's made over the past couple of weeks, I think a lot of it has to do with staying within what it is he can do. They've got, like they always seem to have, a very talented defense, so not taking a lot of risks, letting him utilize the skill position players he has without taking too many unnecessary chances. Is that the right way to sum it up?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, again, both these teams, if you look at Penn State and you look at Michigan State, I would have thought this would have been a game where whoever ran the ball the best would have won the game. But Saquon Barkley had 63 yards rushing. The running back from Michigan State, he had 60 yards rushing. So this was a game that was actually won by the quarterbacks. And then I think McSorley threw 3 picks. Again, turnovers, the rain delay, all those things always work in Michigan State's favor.
When I hear 3 picks in Michigan State, it gives me some shudders of that night game that Michigan played at Michigan State.
I was at that game. It was hard to watch, trust me.
Yeah, well, you said I could have run through some of the holes that you had in 97. I think anyone could have avoided those interceptions that O'Korn threw in that game, but we'll just leave it right there. That is Chris Howard, 1997 national champion with the Michigan Wolverines. Sam Radin, they give me the fancy t-shirt. This is our very first edition of Land of 10 Live, and we're super happy that you're with us here. The other team that's super happy, maybe the only team that's super happy, aside from Michigan State, coming out of the Big Ten right now, is Wisconsin. All of a sudden, the Red Sea opens up, no pun intended, and Wisconsin is like working their way right to another Big Ten championship game.
That's right. Wisconsin does what Wisconsin does. They are the most balanced team in the Big Ten. They run the ball really well. They pass the ball really effectively. They don't turn the ball over a lot. And again, I think we also have to really look at, they also are in the Big Ten West. There's not a really challenge for them week in and week out. It's a conference that is really just, it's all Wisconsin at this point. I mean, they're not really being challenged by anyone. But at the end of the day, that's not their fault. You can only play who's on your schedule. And when you play those teams, you notice Wisconsin, they didn't have a letdown. They could have easily lost some of these games to teams that they should have beaten, but they didn't. They stayed focused. They do what they're good at, and that's why they're in the position that they're in to win the West. And possibly, depending on where things play out, they might be in the college football playoff.
You saw some pictures there of their running back. Taylor's had such great success this season. You talk about the balance they have on offense. Is it fair to say right now that maybe Taylor has been the most consistent running back this season in the Big Ten? I know that's high praise in a league with Saquon Barkley, but this guy has delivered every game he's played.
Yeah, I mean, he's played like this ever since he took over. I mean, he's been the guy. He's one of the best running backs in the country. I would also have to throw Karan Higdon in there of Michigan. He's had 2 back-to-back 200 yards rushing games. He's actually probably averaging more yards per carry, or right around even with what Saquon Barkley is. I think they're both at about 850, 870 yards rushing, 8 or 9 touchdowns on the season. So I'd have to throw Karan Higdon in there as well. But Jonathan Taylor, for a guy that is a true freshman doing the things that he's doing at Wisconsin, it's unbelievable. The kid is a beast.
Now, you talk about Wisconsin and maybe not having a lot of big games this season. And at a later time, maybe when we have some time to debate it, I'd talk about some of the directional schools they play in their non-conference and only beating the teams in front of them. I don't know if that's really true in your non-conference schedule. But what they have in the conference slate this week is a game against Iowa. And we just saw Iowa knock off a division-leading team. What do you make of Iowa this time around against Wisconsin? Big difference being this time Iowa's on the road.
Well, lucky for Wisconsin, they don't have to play in the Bermuda Triangle, also known as Kinnick Stadium. You know, Iowa is not that good when they're not playing at home. So this should be another win for Wisconsin, but I would not be surprised if Iowa continues to ride that wave of success and go in there and look for an upset. This is college football. Anything can happen.
Well, Wisconsin, they win this game and they punch their ticket to the Big Ten championship game. And you look at the success that they've had in past years, they've got to this game, but then once they get there, they run into a team that's more talented. This is setting up maybe the scenario that the Big Ten really didn't want when it comes to the national picture. You get Wisconsin clearly dominating their division, but are they a national contender, and or can they really compete with the champion of the Big Ten East, even if they have a couple losses coming into that game?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that, because we don't really know how good Wisconsin is, just simply because of the schedule, who they've played. Again, you can't really fault them there for that, because they have to play the teams that's in front of them, and they've beaten those teams, and they've beaten those teams convincingly. So you have to give them credit, but at the same time, be cautiously optimistic on where they'll land as far as the college football playoffs is considered. Very
quick, where we sit here right now in Week 11, Wisconsin wins out, beats you picked the 2-loss team in the Big Ten championship. Are they in fact one of the top 4 teams to go to the playoff?
No. I think something will have to happen. Georgia will have to lose. Something will have to happen that will help propel Wisconsin into the college football playoffs. I just don't think the resume matches rewarding them for being one of the top 4. Well, and that's just my opinion.
I think that's exactly right, because the committee is not going to reward them for playing that type of a non-conference schedule, even though they get in being undefeated, or they would have their candidacy to get in being undefeated. Look at what happened to Washington last year, not having that marquee non-conference win. Again, Chris Howard, Sam Radin, very first edition of Land of 10 Live. Happy to be chopping it up with you. Not the happiest season for the Michigan Wolverines, but we still get to work in some Michigan conversation when we get the opportunity. We talked about Karan Higdon a second ago. Michigan maybe with a little bit of a bounce-back 2-game winning streak here, so maybe we're looking at something where Michigan's got some things at least to build for next season offensively. Or do they deserve to be a team that's in consideration, at least to be ranked when the committee comes together again tonight?
I think they do deserve to be ranked, but again, I have to look at Michigan's resume. They've lost to top-ranked teams, and they've beat Minnesota and Rutgers the last 2 games, and they beat them soundly with a really potent rushing attack. But I don't see enough for Michigan to say that they should be ranked really high. I'm just not seeing it, because we haven't seen them perform against teams that have a better record than 500.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on this one. When you look at Michigan's non-conference schedule, they can't help it that Florida's fallen on such hard times this season and the past couple seasons maybe, although they've won some division championships in there. That's not anything Michigan can control. That said, their body of work this season doesn't necessarily tell me that they're one of the 25 best teams in the country, and that's really unfortunate. You would never expect to be in that position with that guy, Jim Harbaugh, as your head coach, that you're not one of the 25 best teams in the country. Is something not working right?
Well, I don't think it's not that a fact that something's not working. I think really people underestimated the loss of the guys like Jordan Lewis and Taco Charlton and all the guys that they lost to the NFL draft. I think this team is the youngest team in college football. I really believe Michigan is probably an offensive line and an elite quarterback away from truly being national contenders. Michigan, they need to find their identity, and I think they have over the last 2 weeks as far as running the ball. But we still need to see more of what Brandon Peters can do before we can start talking about whether or not this team should be ranked or shouldn't be ranked. We just have not seen enough yet.
Well, we'll find that out in the last couple of games, I should say, of the regular season schedule for Michigan. Obviously not a hot seat for Jim Harbaugh, whether or not he's living up to expectations. Same can't really be said in Lincoln, Nebraska for Mike Riley. Neither offense nor defense or hail or snow or anything is seeming to go right for Nebraska right now under Mike Riley. Is this a problem with Nebraska as a program right now? Are they no longer the program that they were 15, 20 years ago? Is this no longer the desirable job that it was then? Or is this a fit issue with Mike Riley that he's not the guy for the job?
Well, I know one guy. I know Bo Pelini is probably sitting somewhere laughing and probably really enjoying, the demise of Nebraska. But listen, they've already fired their AD. I think Mike Riley should be fired. He's 64 years old. His record isn't great at Nebraska. I think it's time for some new blood. I think Nebraska needs to go in a new direction because it's going to start to affect recruiting pretty soon. They've already had one decommitment that I know of, and it's going to be a snowball effect. So Nebraska needs to correct the course, and they need to do it quickly.
I don't think there's any way you can say it hasn't affected recruiting or the image of Nebraska. Let's face it, the kids that are being recruited right now, they weren't born when Nebraska was relevant as a national program. Nebraska is no longer a program that people think about on a national level. Hey, this is one of your bell cow programs, and the boon that it was for the Big Ten a few years ago, right now, that's not materializing at all. I mean, Riley was probably never the right guy for the job when he was hired. You mentioned that the AD has already turned over, but Nebraska is one more bad hire away from, well, that was ancient history when they were a national program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they find themselves in the same situation that Michigan did a few years ago when they went through the Rich Rod era, when they went through the Brady Hoke era. I remember watching a couple of interviews for recruits, and the first thing recruits would say when they were being recruited by Michigan was, well, I need to get to know more about the program. I mean, think about it. As a historic program as Michigan is, recruits need to learn more about it, right? So you bring in a guy who, like Jim Harbaugh, big personality. He can plant the Michigan flag all over the country, rebrand it. That's what Nebraska needs to do. They need to follow they need a home run coach.
Well, they need a home run coach. I don't know that there's that guy that has that national cachet or has that program restoration cachet, but there's a guy coaching right now in Orlando, Florida named Scott Frost, who's got quite the affiliation with the program, and he's got the offensive pedigree from his days at Oregon that he might be able to bring that kind of buzz back to the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
You know what? I can never forgive Scott Frost for his lobbying for the 1997
No,
National
that's
Championship.
Osborne, man.
No,
you can put whatever you want on Frost. That was the sympathy vote for Osborne.
Exactly, but Scott Frost went out and he lobbied for it, and he got it. They got the co-national championship. But I will say this, Scott Frost is an excellent coach. You look at what he's done at UCF. He's done an amazing job there. He did an amazing job while he was at Oregon. I think Scott Frost, he's the prodigal son. He can bring some enthusiasm, some excitement to the program. He's young, he's youthful, and I think a lot of recruits will get behind what he's able to do at Nebraska.
Well, we talk about Nebraska, and maybe the Big Ten had Nebraska in mind as being more of a power in the Big Ten West. We know the debacle that was the Leaders and Legends. Does the Big Ten need to do something to change the balance of power right now with the stacked teams in the Big Ten East and then the Big Ten West?
You know what? I think so. Right now, the Big Ten East is just so stacked, it's ridiculous. I mean, you've got top-ranked teams that are really taking each other out and knocking each other out of national contention, and that's really hurting the Big Ten. So I think something needs to happen. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what the correct answer is, but they definitely need to consider doing some sort of realignment, but not touching the rivals that exist within the Big Ten.
Well, I mean, you're looking at the Big Ten West standings right now. There's got to be another team year in and year out that can compete with Wisconsin, and that was supposed to be Nebraska, frankly. And you'd think that maybe Iowa would be there. The Big Ten's got a real problem with this. I was a huge proponent of going to a geographical split that made sense, which is what this is. It's unfortunate that the East is so much more talented, but if we go back to the Leaders and Legends and me having to justify that to my friends, I mean, dude, that didn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't even know, like, it's the 4 I schools in Michigan and Michigan State. I couldn't for $1 name them all anymore.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the Leaders and Legends. I think that was more probably some marketing ploy, right? So they can sell jackets, Leaders and Legends jackets and sweaters and hats. I really don't understand it, but the Big Ten really needs to take a look at this because, again, when you've got a loaded East, the way you have now, literally top teams knocking each other off every week, it's not a good look for the Big Ten. It's not going to help you when it comes time to evaluating the college football playoffs.
Well, we'll be back in another week to evaluate the week that was. Some more of those battles of the Titans you're talking about. We talked about Wisconsin and Iowa, and then obviously Michigan State and Ohio State. It's been a real pleasure working with you this week.
Absolutely.
Keep it here. You can find out more about the playoff picture. It's been a lot of fun, my man.
Absolutely. Hopefully I will have another shirt. Was that a 2X?
No.
Okay.
They're going to have to get to work on that.
Yeah,
they got a number 8 jersey, I think, Mike.
I don't think that's going to fit anymore.
No?
Yeah.
In your closet?
It doesn't fit.
I would try it every day. For Chris Howard, I'm Sam Radin. The very first Land of 10 Live. Thanks for being with us.